Hello, MTLab listeners. My name is Jess Bergson. I'm a second-year Master of Arts Management student at Carnegie Mellon University and Chief Editor of Interactive Content at MTLab. Today I'm here with Erik Gensler, President of Capacity Interactive, a digital marketing firm that works with over 100 of the country's leading arts and cultural organizations. Erik has a long list of accomplishments, including presenting for organizations such as the League of American Theaters and the National Arts Marketing Project. MTLab is thrilled to welcome Erik to our podcast series to discuss the future of digital arts marketing. Hi, Erik. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So to start this off, can you give us a little bit of your background and explain how you got into the digital arts marketing world?
Sure. Well, from the time I was a kid, I loved going to performances and museums. When I first got my driver's license, the first thing I did was get a subscription to the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park with my friends so we could go starting when I was 16 years old. But I mean, even as a kid, my parents would take me to theater and opera and dance. It was really a big part of who I was growing up. And as I went through my career and I graduated from college, I definitely went more of the serious job route where I worked in management consulting and got a really great background in data and analytics and using numbers to tell a story. Ultimately, while I learned a ton in management consulting, I was not super fulfilled as a person, and it was sort of the first hint to me that they don't teach that in school, that in order to be happy, you have to find something that really means something, that you wake up every day excited to do. And over my 20s, I went through a number of jobs, and it wasn't until I realized, and I spent a lot of time soul searching in my really late 20s, that I found that, okay, if I was going to work on something, I wanted to work in the arts. And so I went from management consulting to working at NBC for a number of years. And the first thing I did was I was an NBC page, so like Kenneth at 30 Rock, which was really fun. And then I worked in a number of departments through this program called the NBC Sales Associate Program, where I got to work at the network, and I got to work in San Francisco at the station and back in New York at the NBC station. And I worked in sales and marketing, but I really learned a ton about sales. And as a business owner, those are really great skills to have to get formal sales training working for NBC. Anyway, so I went to work in the arts at a company called the Marketing Group, which was now Allied Live. And then I went from there to New York City Opera. This is a very long answer to a very short question, but working at City Opera when it was announced that Gerard Mortier was going to come to City Opera and Peter Gelb was at the Met. I remember reading a New York Times article talking about an opera smackdown at Lincoln Center. So Mortier's avant-garde vision from Europe against Peter Gelb's, all the shakeups that he was doing at the Met, and it was going to be a super exciting time. And I was working for Thomas Cott at the of Yves Cotmail fame, who was the interim marketing director at City Opera, and because at that time we were preparing for Mortier to come, there was an influx of budget to do all sorts of cool things, and this was around 2006 when the internet was really becoming a thing. Facebook was just reaching out beyond the core millennials. Podcasting was in its first wave of becoming a thing. The ticket online sales were really increasing for arts organizations. And so I got the opportunity to rebuild City Opera's website. And when I found out about Google Analytics, my head exploded. And we did a Google Analytics implementation on City Opera's site with e-commerce data. That was way before most arts organizations were doing that, and I was like in love. I was obsessed with Google Analytics and the dashboard, and I started going to analytics conferences. And then I had also read Permission Marketing, which is Seth Godin's book about rethinking the marketing model, which we talk a lot about now at Capacity, because I think it's fundamental to understanding marketing, that interruption marketing no longer works as well, and you have to begin relationships with people through content marketing. So Permission Marketing really inspired me at City Opera, and we used a lot of this new budget to do things that were really all about lead generation. So we started a podcast series, and I remember going around the city with Corey Ellison, who was the dramaturg at City Opera at the time, and we were interviewing Hal Prince, and we interviewed Mark Morris, and she would just call anybody, and we would do podcast interviews with them because I wanted to get a following of engaged people, and I'm incredibly proud of those podcasts. I wonder if they're even still on iTunes. I haven't listened, but they were so much fun. And we were creating content, and even at City Opera, I was producing 2 to 3 videos per opera, and we were pushing them out over YouTube and over our email. We were really starting to invest in Facebook marketing. We were really thinking strategically about email and using analytics. It was very early days of remarketing, so we were starting to dip our toe in there. And I had this amazing laboratory at City Opera with Thomas, who was very encouraging of all this to try out these new things. Well, when it didn't work out with Mortier, if anyone's followed the history of City Opera, Thomas had moved on to Alvin Ailey, and Ailey received a $1 million grant from the Doris Duke Foundation. And the grant was all about using digital tools to become better marketers. And so Thomas said, you have to come do this with me. And so I was given another laboratory in which to experiment, and this time I had $1 million. Mm-hmm. So all the lessons I learned from, at the City Opera website project, we applied to the Ailey site. So we rebuilt the site. We heavied up on Facebook marketing. We really started to dig into behavioral advertising, doing remarketing before I think a lot of people were doing it or even knew what it was. And so I had a second laboratory to experiment. And then I started talking at conferences, because all these things I was learning, I would go to the Tessitore conference and just talk about the things we've learned. And, people come up to me and eventually I went from having City Opera as a client to Ailey as a client, because at City Opera, once we saw what was the writing on the walls when Mortier was going to leave, I asked them if I could turn my job into a consulting job, and they were happy because they could pay me less, and I was happy because I could go work at Ailey as well, so I would split my time. And then as I got more and more clients, I started bringing on freelancers to work with me and take on other projects, and that was how Capacity Interactive was born. And then we eventually got an office, and everything went off to the races from there.
So you mentioned how when you first started out in this world, it looked very different. People weren't using e-commerce, etc. What is your assessment of the arts and cultural organizations today in terms of their digital marketing efforts?
I mean, I think there's a very broad spectrum. I don't think it's I think it varies by many things. It varies by the size of the organization. It varies by genre. It varies by geography. I think some organizations have been very thoughtful and strategic and have made great strides. I think fundamentally having a senior leadership team that is fully on board to embrace digital is very, very important in their organizations, that have strategically invested in certain things that are digital, like New York City Ballet. Their investment in video and the quality of that video was a strategic investment they made a long time ago, and it's paid off in spades. I'd say San Francisco Ballet, their investment in understanding their user experience and the research that went into their current iteration of their website is absolutely amazing. I'd say Alvin Ailey, that their investment in social media starting a long time ago, they have 650,000 Facebook fans, and the ROI that they can drive through Facebook because of that is, it's not just about fans, but it's about content creation and focus on that channel. Ailey did not go into all the social networks. They weren't even on Twitter or Instagram until a few years ago. They doubled down on Facebook. And so much of this comes down to strategy. And strategy is understanding your limitations. And arts organizations are constrained by time and money. And I would also say on some level, expertise. And so if you're a leader, you need to sort of understand, what am I going to focus my limited time and money on? Am I going to try to, do every single social network, or am I going to do one that works for me really well? Am I going to double down on video? Am I going to double down on, making my website better? So you can't do everything. You have to figure out what you're going to do well. And I think there's a number of challenges. One, I think there is a lack of digital skills within the sector. And I think over time that's going to evolve, but I still think we're at a point where we have a lot of people who have a lot of ambition and are very, very smart, but frankly there's just not enough budget and there's not enough time for some of the people particularly in smaller organizations, to do all the digital marketing. Like my advice for a smaller organization or for organizations trying to staff the digital portion of their marketing department is you really need to focus on 3 areas. You need to focus on email marketing, you need to focus on content creation, and you need to focus on writing for the web. So if you have only 1 or 2 people, those are the areas you need to focus on. Realistically, a lot of the other areas that are critical to success, like SEO, search engine marketing, display advertising, doing smart digital strategy in targeting, in measurement, you need to outsource those. I mean, maybe that does sound self-serving, but like that is why this company was built, because there is no small arts organization in the world that can, with the size of their staff and the budget that they have, that they're going to do SEO well without outside expertise. Same with website design. Your website is too important to try to poke at internally. There are some organizations that may have 1 internal developer, and that's great. But if you're going to, very rarely is someone going to have a website designer or a website developer that has the skills necessary to create a 21st century website that arts organizations need, because guess what? People are coming to your site right after they went to Amazon. They're going to expect the same experience. They don't care that you don't have the budget for a good website. So I think strategy is about understanding what you can do and understanding your limitations and budgeting accordingly. So say, I'm going to budget internally to do this, I'm going to bring in outside help for this, and I'm going to prioritize what I can and can't do and really firmly stick to that strategy and really spend most of your efforts on the things that are going to move the needle for your business. So you go back, you ask the state of arts. I think for a lot of organizations where they're still operating like it's 2005, where they're sort of appending digital in a very non-strategic way. And I'm not saying that accusatorily. I'm saying it as, they're often run by people of a different generation. In the last 15 years, the way the world consumes media has fundamentally changed, probably faster than any other time in human history. And organizations are still managing to keep up. Look, there are a number of organizations that are perhaps hip deep in digital. Everyone can improve, certainly. I mean, even the biggest organizations can absolutely improve. You look at the organizations that are incredibly digital. They were founded in a digital era. So their ethos, what they're about is being able to tell their story in a modern digital way. Most of the arts organizations that we work with were started 50, 80 years ago. They're run by people who are artists or run by people who are fundraisers. Digital and digital communications is not in their ethos. You cannot append digital strategy to an old way of doing business and be as successful as someone that has full embrace and strategy being driven by the top person. So I think we're going to start to see leadership within the arts evolve to people who are in their late 30s who have grown up using computers, have been grown up with digital communication, and we're going to start to see more evolution in this area. So, I could talk about this for another hour with different data points, but I think it really varies. I think it's exciting. It's exciting to see, when we're on kickoff calls with new clients. Christopher, our vice president here, just told me that it's amazing when he's on these kickoff calls because people are so much further ahead than they were 2 years ago when we started these kickoff calls. But this week I had multiple calls with arts organizations that their idea of digital was buying an ad on their local newspaper website. Guess what, folks? That's not digital. That's the same as print advertising on a digital medium. So I think there's still many organizations that have a long way to go.
That's actually a great segue to my next question. So you mentioned Amazon and how people are used to these very sophisticated purchase paths. What do you think the digital marketing world will look like 5 years from now, and how do you think that's going to affect the arts?
I mean, we talk a lot about the evolution to mobile. And, I watched the numbers and I watched the path when you compare visits from desktop to visits from mobile. And it was this steep line of desktop visits going down and mobile visits going up. And guess what? In the last year, most organizations that those lines have crossed and we're now more mobile. Well, a third of arts organizations, according to our digital marketing benchmark study, still do not have mobile or mobile-enabled sites. That's problematic in so many ways. if especially when you're thinking of your most valuable consumers, like your subscribers, show me one good mobile subscription path of an arts organization. There's a few out there, but the majority of people, your most valuable customer comes to buy a subscription on a mobile device, they're going to have a horrible experience. They're going to either have to call or go to the desktop. So I think we have a very far way to go in terms of mobile. So we're now in a mobile-first world. We've been talking about this mobile-first world for 5 years. Do almost everything. I can look at Google Drive. I can look at Dropbox. I can write my email. I can go on Slack. I can do it all through my phone. That is a mobile-only experience. And so if you don't have a mobile site, you can say, oh, no one converts on mobile. Well, they don't convert on mobile, A, because your mobile purchase period path probably sucks. And two, there's all this data showing that 65% of visits that start on mobile end with conversions on desktop. So research is being done on mobile devices. And research is being done on tablets, but people are converting on desktop because that's the easier experience to actually purchase.
Is there a particular future or rising technology that you think may cause challenges for digital marketing that arts managers should be aware of?
Well, I don't think I fully answered your last question of what does the future look like. I think the future looks like mobile only. I think the future looks like, a place where you have to learn to storytell in a digital way or you're going to be screwed. I mean, look at the death of arts journalism. As an arts lover, it's incredibly upsetting that arts journalism is going away, that major newspapers are no longer can afford arts coverage, and arts advertisers aren't there either, and nor should they be necessarily. But the idea that you can lean on reviews in the future is going to be less and less the case the further we get in the future. So the answer to that is you have to become your own media company, which means you have to learn to tell your story, which means you have to invest in content creation. You have to invest in amazing photography that's going to get people to pay attention. You have to invest in video. You have to invest in people who know how to use social media to tell your story, because you can no longer rely on traditional media to do that. So the future, that is only going to become more the case. So you have to get that social storytelling piece. And I don't care what social platform you're on. Like, yes, Facebook is the platform of the day where you need to be 80% of users, people spending 50 minutes a day on Facebook. Look, Snapchat is having this meteoric rise. It's the social network du jour. But in 5 years, I don't know what network it's going to be. It's going to be some other network we don't know about, but it doesn't matter. You're still going to need to learn how to use it. So you're going to need to learn how to tell your story through a digital device, and you're going to need to keep up on this stuff because you have to be at where the eyes and ears are as a marketer.
So you talk about these things arts organizations should be investing in. But a reality is in the arts industry is that not everyone can be affording to invest in every single technology. If there was one piece of technology or software or even digital infrastructure that you could tell every arts or cultural organization to invest in right now, what would it be?
Facebook. I mean, no question. There's absolutely no, I would not hesitate for even a second. It's Facebook. Consistently, it is the channel that delivers the highest ROIs. It is the most powerful advertising tool ever invented. It is, if used well, the ability to tell your story and get it to the right people and measure the results is unmatched by anybody. I mean, frankly, I look at these results all the time. Our Facebook campaigns are creaming our Google campaigns, and I think we both do them. We do both of those network channels incredibly well. We're using those to the best of their abilities, both of those platforms. And Facebook has figured out a few things. One, it gives the advertiser ability to be part of the key content. So when people are going on social, they're looking to discover things. And as arts organizations, having a product that people want to discover, it's perfect. And, and it's central. It's part of the newsfeed. When you're doing a banner ad, that's interruptive. It's more targeted, and especially if you use behavioral data to get to the right people. But the truth of the matter is, people are going to the Huffington Post or going to the web because they want to read the article. They don't want to be interrupted by your ad. I think the display ads really just reinforce the social storytelling. So without a doubt, given the size of the audience, the ability to storytell, the ability to target and measure, there's no doubt that arts organizations should be spending the majority. I think one of the top items of any arts organization's marketing budget needs to be on Facebook. And by the way, organic social is dying. When I say Facebook, you got to spend money. You got to get out your checkbook and write a check or connect your credit card to Facebook and leverage that incredibly powerful tool, because that is where the eyes and ears are right now.
Is there a particular amount of money you think people should be spending at the very least per campaign? Is there a certain point where the return, it doesn't make as much sense for someone to be putting the money in if they don't have the money to begin with?
That is such a complex question. So, are you a 200-seat theater in Albany, or are you a 3,000-person ballet company in New York City? How big is your remarketing pool? How many fans do you have? So, the more money you have to spend on acquisition, the lower your ROI is going to be, but you ultimately have to spend money to acquire people, to bring them from the top of the funnel to the middle of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. So there is no world which I can guess how much money you need. So it's so relative, how much you want to spend, what your goals are, what you're trying to do, how well you've done in the past. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Erik. This has been an amazing conversation that I think will be really valuable for our listeners and readers.
Great. Thank you so much.
You have been listening to the Arts Management and Technology Laboratory podcast series. You can find more information on the intersection between the arts and technology at amped-lab.org. Or you can follow our bi-weekly podcast series on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Thank you for joining us.